For over a century now, Rolex watches have become a symbol of luxury and success. Rolex has continued to stay in the forefront of the watch world with classic design and innovation to this day. This is the great story of an orphan who created Rolex. Hans Wilsdorf was born in Bavaria, Germany in 1881 to a successful middle-class family of ironmongers. At the age of 12, circumstances made young Hans an orphan. His charge was given to an aunt and uncle who promptly placed him in a boarding school in Korbach, Germany, about 25 miles away from his home. He focused on his schoolwork to survive and became quite proficient in reading, writing, and speaking English. This would later become quite useful. One day, Hans decided he had had enough and left the boarding school for Geneva, Switzerland. He found a job working for a pearl merchant. He learned the business and noted that the company actually did not create anything and still made a great profit. The company purchased pearls from various markets, then sorted, graded, and packaged them for sale to jewelers. This would also prove to be a great lesson for young Hans. Ultimately, Hans Wilsdorf got a job with a growing watch company in Switzerland. He was hired because he could read and write English and could answer correspondence from the British Empire and America, the richest nations in the world at the time. While at the watch company, Hans became fascinated with the watch movements and their accuracy. This was the beginning of his lifelong passion. Hans later found a partner, Alfred Davis, and together they opened their own watch company, Wilsdorf and Davis. Hans convinced a small watch movement manufacturer in Switzerland to produce watches for him small enough to wear on the wrist. At that time, men used pocket watches because wrist watches were not very accurate and were worn almost exclusively by women. Hans Wilsdorf thought that pocket watches were inconvenient to use and was convinced he could produce accurate wrist watches. However, he decided he needed a much catchy name for his watches other than Wilsdorf and Davis. So in 1908, he came up with his new name, Rolex. Wilsdorf and Davis first registered the trade name Rolex in 1908. Mr. Wilsdorf continued to be innovative with his watch and was intent upon its high level of accuracy. A great visionary, Hans saw the trend to move away from pocket watches. The new watches proved to be very successful. In 1914, Rolex was the first wristwatch in history to be awarded a A-class, a certificate from the KEW Observatory, an institution noted for its accurate measurements, which was founded by King George III in 1769. 1 year later, the British government implemented a 33% customs duty. By 1919, Rolex, prompted by this duty, had moved its international headquarters from London to Geneva, Switzerland, where it remains today. In 1926, Hans Wilsdorf added a new level of distinction to his watches. He made the watch waterproof and called it the Oyster. He coined the term due to his frustration in trying to open a tightly closed oyster. In 1927, Mr. Wilsdorf was looking to make his Rolex watch known around the world. He employed the services of a young London typist named Mercedes Glitz, who at the time was attempting to swim the English Channel. Hans announced to the world media that she would be wearing his waterproof Rolex Oyster watch and that she would emerge from the water and his watch would be perfectly on time. This had never been done before. When Miss Glitz stepped from the water, exhausted, her Rolex Oyster was right on time. She and the Rolex Oyster made headlines around the world. Rolex had invented the waterproof wristwatch. Advertised as the Wonder Watch, Mercedes Glitz had provided the proof. The remaining weaknesses was the fact that the watch mechanism had to be reassembled to ensure that it worked, as the multiple disassemblies of the crown resulted in the water resistance of the watch being damaged. As the dial became less water resistant, the watch lost its effectiveness. In order to solve this problem and to finish imposing the brand in the watchmaking world, Hans Wilsdorf bought many patents, allowing him to create the mechanism now used in many watch models. In 1933, a Rolex watch was on the wrist of the first expedition to fly over the Everest without losing reliability. In 1945, the brand released an innovative model, the Rolex Datejust, which was at the time the first model to be able to indicate the time and the day at the same time in an automatic way. In 1954, Rolex released the Rolex GMT Master, allowing the reading of 2 different time zones on the same dial. This model of watch was highly appreciated by airline pilots who could keep permanently a time zone of their choice. The possibility of displaying 2 time zones on the same dial was very practical because they often had to move between several time zones. Nowadays, the references of the GMT Master are numerous, but each one draws its origin from the 1954 collection. A year later, Rolex released a new collection in 1957, the first wristwatch model dedicated to women, the Lady Datejust, a watch with a much smaller diameter but just as precise as other models of the brand. The Lady Datejust is an adaptation of the men's collection, the Rolex Day-Date. The year 1960 was a year full of surprises but also of disappointments for the Rolex brand. Its founder, Hans Wilsdorf, died that year, and the management was handed over to Andre Heiniger, a man who shared the same convictions as the founder and was just as much a philanthropist as he was. Hans Wilsdorf's passion in life was his Rolex watch. His watch was priced just out of reach of middle-class man, meaning to earn one would have to contribute a bit more, work a little harder, and reach a bit further. Upon Mr. Hans Wilsdorf's death in 1960, he owned all of Rolex, and the company today is still privately held and overseen by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, which is a charitable organization. Mr. Wilsdorf had over 700 patents. For over a century, Rolex watches have accompanied explorers and achievers around the world. From the top of the highest of mountains to the deepest reaches of the ocean. Today, Rolex is present at most prestigious events in golf, sailing, tennis, motorsports, and at equestrian tournaments. Rolex makes a unique and lasting contribution to global culture, science, and exploration. Over the years, Rolex has kept creating great watches and proving the luxury has no limits. What are your thoughts on the Rolex brand? Let us know in the comment section. Thank you for watching this video.